one guide in our newsroom, and there has been an attempt, as perhaps you know now, on the life of President Kennedy. He was wounded in an automobile driving from Dallas Airport into downtown Dallas, along with Governor Connolly of Texas. They've been taken to Parkland Hospital there, where their condition is as yet unknown. We have just learned, however, that Father Hubert, one of the two priests called into the room, has administered the last sacrament of the church to President Kennedy. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Today marks 56 years since what some would call the greatest coup d'etat, arguably, potentially, in American history. The only other thing that could possibly be compared to it would be the assassination of Lincoln, perhaps. JFK was only able to serve right at 3 years in office. And even though he was such a short-lived president, people still talk about him to this day. There's been many presidents who only had one term. Something about JFK has stood out and has stood the test of time, even beyond the fact of assassination. Obviously, people know about that. But there's just something about JFK, the charisma, something that has stood that test of time. So today, I want to dedicate this video to the legacy of JFK, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the things that JFK wanted to do had he been reelected in 1964. Some of the policies you don't really hear talked about very much on the mainstream media. And we're also going to talk about the questions that people have been asking for years. What really happened on November 22nd of 1963? So without any further ado, I want to just jump straight into the first clip. The Vietnam War. Now, most of you know that our involvement in Vietnam started underneath JFK. Okay? That did start underneath him. And he did send troops over to South Vietnam. However, as you're about to see in this clip, in September of 1963, this is what JFK had to say about the war in Vietnam. So let's take a look.
President, the only hot war we've got running at the moment is, of course, the one in Vietnam. And we've got our difficulties there, quite obviously.
I don't think that unless a greater effort is made by the government to win popular support, that the war can be won out there. In the final analysis, it's their war. They're the ones who have to win it or lose it. We can help them. We can give them equipment. We can send our men out there as advisors, but they have to win it, the people of Vietnam, against the communists. We're prepared to continue to assist them. But I don't think that the war can be won unless the people support the effort. And in my opinion, in the last 2 months, the government has gotten out of touch with the people. The repressions against the Buddhists, we felt, were very unwise. Now, all we can do is to make it very clear that we don't think this is the way to win. It's my hope that this will become increasingly obvious to the government, that they will take steps to try to bring back popular support for this very essential struggle.
Well, hasn't every indication from Saigon been that President Diem has no intention of changing his pattern?
If he doesn't change it, of course, that's his decision. He's been there 10 years. And as I say, he has carried this burden when he's been counted out on a number of occasions. Our best judgment is that he can't be successful on this basis. We hope that he comes to see that. But in the final analysis, it's the people and the government themselves who have to win or lose this struggle. All we can do is help. And we're making it very clear. But I don't agree with those who say we should withdraw. That'd be a great mistake. That'd be a great mistake.
So break that first little clip down there, first and foremost. So obviously, just go ahead and get the obvious out of the way. I disagree with what he said at the end they shouldn't have withdrawn from Vietnam. From looking back on history, as I say, hindsight's 2020. A lot of people argue that's a war we probably should have never gotten our noses into. But it's among good company, Iraq and many others. So, but with that being said, one thing that I will say in regards to what Kennedy's getting at here is he didn't want to go full scale, from the sound of this, into Vietnam. Yes, he had troops over there. Yes, we were supporting South Vietnam, but he didn't want full-fledged American troops just going into a big, massive war over there. What did he say? It's up to them to win. We can assist. Now, if I might try to venture into why Kennedy may have even had some of the visions, or ideas that he had about why we even needed to be there in the first place. Keep in mind, we're in an era here, we're still off the heels of World War II. We were attacked by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. We just faced the threat of Hitler all around the world. And again, the mentality of the country and the world as a whole about the issue that could arise if there wasn't a lid put on that sort of communism that we saw from that time period. And if that was not handled in a timely manner, we could see another breakout. And who knows, and do we really want the risk of a World War III? So that was the mentality back in that period, and I'm willing to give them the pass on that fearful mentality. Within the course of 50 years, much less than 50 years, we went through 2 massive world wars. That's not good. That's not good. So I can very easily see why, when there was the potential of a threat, dictator regimes and whatnot, we step in and say something. So I completely understand. However, even Kennedy, being pressured by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to do all this war, while he did send troops into Vietnam, even though he said very clearly right there, it's their war to fight and it's their war to win, and the only thing we can do is assist with it. He was very clear in that statement. And of course, who ramped up going to war in Vietnam? Lyndon Johnson. Oh, and how did he pay for it? Well, he tapped Social Security and started taking money out. Of course, set the precedent so that every president, basically since Lyndon Johnson, has tapped into Social Security. Okay? So, LBJ set the precedent for that to fund the full-scale war into Vietnam. But during this period, matter of fact, even much before this, there was another thing that the military wanted to push Kennedy into, and that was a war with Cuba. Of course, if you've studied history, you know what the Bay of Pigs was. It was a massive invasion. They found out we were coming. It failed miserably, and I mean miserably, okay? And they wanted to go back for a round 2. Kennedy said, nope. Not on my watch, boys. You gave me a black eye with the first one. You convinced me that we should have done this. I've learned my lesson. We shouldn't have done it, and it's not happening. And it pissed the military-industrial complex off. The Joint Chiefs of Staff were not happy one single bit with that decision. Okay? And for all the people out there who think that the government is so trustworthy, that the intelligence community is so trustworthy, all these mainstream news outlets that bring intelligence people in to give their 2 cents on matters, as we discussed the other day, you think they're really trustworthy? I got something for you to go look up. Operation Northwoods. Made it all the way through the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all the way to President Kennedy's desk. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people out there going to say, well, that's skeptical. That's conspiracy theory. Hey, go do your research for yourself. You tell me what you think after you've done your homework. Don't just take mainstream media's word for it. They're going to call me a kook, but you know what? Do your own homework. Don't trust the mainstream media to just tell you what you need to know, because you're never going to be informed if you do. So go do your homework on Operation Northwoods. I'll give you the brief description. You're welcome to go check me on it if you would like. Basically, the intent was to rally up public support. Now, you heard what Kennedy said about Vietnam. We have to get public support. The intent was to rally up public support to invade Cuba. And the intent was to have people hijacking airplanes, committing crimes, blowing things up, killing people, so on and so forth, and stage it up to where it looked like these were Cuban, immigrants that had come into the country, and they were like pro-Castro terrorists or something. And so we could frame it up against Castro. Look what they're doing in our country. In the meantime, how many innocent American lives would have been cost at this? And this was stamped off on all the way up to President Kennedy's desk. And it was he who had to shoot it down and say, no, we are not doing this. Again, if you don't believe me, you doubt me on it, feel free to go do your own homework on it, and then you be the judge of what you think. Again, Operation Northwoods, if you want to go look it up. Okay, so President Kennedy had to shoot that down as well. Now, a couple of other things that President Kennedy did during his time. First and foremost, he said that if he was reelected in 1964, he would bust the CIA into 1,000 pieces because he did not like what the CIA was doing behind the scenes. CIA being the intelligence community. And of course, we've said on this channel multiple times, you can't trust the intelligence community. Even Chuck Schumer hinted in an interview about talking about Donald Trump, you don't mess with the intelligence community because they have 6 ways to Sunday of getting back at you. And of course, this floating rumor right now that the whistleblower, he who shall not be named, is a CIA agent. Go figure, okay? So Kennedy said he would bust the CIA into 1,000 pieces if he was reelected. Yeah, Lyndon Johnson definitely didn't do that, okay? And here's another good one here, okay? Kennedy also said that if he got reelected, he wanted to take away the oil depletion allowance. Something that the big oil tycoons were doing to get big tax breaks and make all their big money in the oil business. He wanted to take that away. Okay? They didn't like that either. So the military-industrial complex isn't happy. He won't go into Cuba. He's sitting there saying that we can help Vietnam, but we shouldn't go full-fledged in. But we shouldn't pull out what we already have. So they're not getting enough out of them on Vietnam either. Okay? And then, back in the 1960s, President Kennedy went on to say the following. Now, I'll put this in a clip the other day. I put this video in a clip. We're going to take a look at it one more time just for the sake of this video. President Kennedy said this over 50 years ago.
In halls such as this, where your predecessors, where Dave Dubinsky himself actually stood, where another former president stood, and fought this issue out of Social Security against the same charges. This argument that the government should stay out, that it saps our pioneer stock. I used to hear that argument when we were talking about raising the minimum wage to $1.25. I remember one day being asked to step out into the hall. And up the corridor came 4 distinguished-looking men with straw hats on and canes. They told me they had just flown in from a state in their private plane, and they wanted me to know that if we passed a bill providing for time and a half for service station attendants, who were then working about 55 to 60 hours at straight time, it would sap their self-reliance. The fact of the matter is, what saps anyone's self-reliance is working 60 hours at straight time, or working at 85 or 95 or $1 an hour. I understand that there's going to be a program this week against this bill in which an English physician is going to come and talk about how bad their plans are. It may be, but he ought to talk about it in England. Because his plan and what they do in England is entirely different. In England, the entire cost of medicine for people of all ages, all of it, doctors, the choice of doctors, hospitals, from the time you're born to the time you die, are included in a government program. But what we're talking about is entirely different. And I hope that while he's here, he and Dr. Spock and others who have joined us will come to see what we're trying to do. The fact of the matter is that what we are now talking about doing, most of the countries of Europe did years ago.
The British did it 30 years ago. We are behind every country pretty nearly in Europe in this matter of medical care for our citizens. And then those who say that this should be left to private effort. In those hospitals in New Jersey where the doctors said they wouldn't treat anyone, who paid their hospital bills through Social Security, those hospitals and every other new hospital, the American people, all of us, contribute 1/2, 1 or 2/3 for every new hospital, the national government. We pay 55% of all the research done. We help young men become doctors. We are concerned with the progress of this country. And those who say that what we are now talking about spoils our great pioneer heritage should remember that the West was settled with 2 great actions by the national government. One, in President Lincoln's administration, when he gave a homestead to everyone who went west, and in 1862 he set aside government property to build our land-grant colleges. This cooperation between an alert and progressive citizenry and a progressive government is what has made this country great, and we shall continue as long as we have the opportunity to do so.
Pretty much says it all right there. So if you haven't picked up on it and you didn't watch my video from a little over a week ago, JFK was pitching a system for universal health care, Medicare for all, single payer, whatever you want to call it. He was pitching something along those lines. Something we still don't have to this day. The man was assassinated 56 years ago on this day. And he was pitching a system that the corporatists are out there calling radical. Oh, it can't be done. It can't be done. This man, right here, over 50 years ago, half a century ago, over that, okay, pitched this concept. And what did he say? The British did it 30 years ago. That's 30 years ago from the 1960s. What does that mean? They passed it back in the 30s. The frickin' 30s. The 1930s. They established this. And yet it is 2019 and we still have nothing. JFK was a man far, far, far ahead of his time, and definitely someone who had good intentions in mind for the people. And then on November 22nd, 1963, he was assassinated. Now, wrapping up the video. Obviously, we all know there's been conspiracy theories, and we've got the official report. Now, let's just do a quick breakdown, and then you be the judge on what you think happened to this man. The official report says that a man named Lee Harvey Oswald, an only shooter, acting alone, a former Marine who had converted over into Marxism, tried to go live in Russia at one point, made frequent trips to Mexico City to talk to people, communists and so on and so forth. He acted alone with a piece of crap bolt action, I believe Italian rifle that had a reputation for the bolt jamming. It jammed real bad. Every time you fired off one round, you had to take the time to resight the gun. And he is the one who carried out this assassination. Now, I believe the time frame on the shots that he got off was 3 shots in, I believe, 8 seconds. Now, let's talk about Oswald's military record. When Oswald got into the military, he only classified as a marksman. Okay? Now, I've heard people try and bring that little fact up and say, oh, but he qualifies as a marksman. He qualifies as a marksman in the military. Like that's impressive. Except that's like one of the lowest you can qualify as. That's not good. And of course, then expert marksmen have taken the same gun and tried to reenact the same scenario. And do you know how many of them were successful? None. None were successful. And one of the people who tried was a man named Carlos Hathcock. And he was regarded at the time for being one of the best snipers around. Okay? He couldn't do it. He could not do it. If they got the correct amount of shots off in that amount of time, they were not accurate. They were not accurate. They were just quick bang, 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 as quick as they could get them off. Okay? Couldn't get it done. So there's problem number one. Okay? Problem number two. The grassy knoll theory. If you've studied the JFK assassination, you've heard about this. Many people in the vicinity of that area reported hearing shots coming from back behind them over their shoulders in a grassy knoll area. And of course, they claim it came from the Texas Book Depository building, not the grassy knoll area. All right. Now, on the Zapruder film, if you can get the right clip, and I tried to find some clips, they've made these things increasingly harder to find than they were a few years ago. I remember me and some friends in high school would be talking about this stuff. It wasn't hard to find these clips at all. Yeah, good luck with it now. It's real hard to find them now. Okay? But either way, there's a man and his family. He's kind of covering his children, laying in the grass. He was the closest civilian to the fatal headshot when it happened. He was in the Zapruder film. Now, he testified, talked to Jesse Ventura on Jesse Ventura's old show, Conspiracy Theory. He spoke to him, gave his account of the events. Again, closest man to the fatal headshot, never testifies for the Warren Commission about what happened to President Kennedy. Nope. Never talks to him. Ain't that ironic? All right. Then they pick up Lee Harvey Oswald, and they claim that not only did he shoot President Kennedy, but he also shot a cop on the way to a movie theater, a cop named J.D. Tippit. Okay? So he supposedly shot this cop now. And he shot him with a revolver handgun. Okay? And there were shell casings all around Tippit's body. Now, the only kind of gun that empties the shells after you shoot it would be, like 9mm typical handgun, got the slide up top, things like that. Revolvers, the cases don't come out until you open it and dump them. So you're expecting me to believe that this man shot this cop and then sat there and emptied his shells out too around the body? Yeah, that's literally, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, meanwhile, the president has been shot. And by this point, he could have already been dead. They're trying to figure out who did it and what's going on. Now, meanwhile, all the way across Dallas, some bystander sees a man sneaking into a movie theater, going inside, and he had not paid for a ticket. And that's the only evidence that he had just someone going into a movie theater that had not paid for a ticket. And they call the police. And what shows up to pick up Oswald? But basically the entire Dallas PD. They had no real evidence that that was the man who shot Kennedy at the time. That the only report that they had was that someone went into a movie theater and didn't buy a ticket. And the entire Dallas PD show up as almost as if they knew that that was the man that they were supposed to get. Now, if that doesn't smell fishy to you, I mean, hey, you be your judge, but to me, that stinks. Something smells foul about that. I mean, entirely. Okay? You've got the president shot on the other side of town. There's no indicator that the shooter is this man, but yet you all show up. Something doesn't sound right about that to me. Okay? That being said, they all show up. They pick up Oswald. Now, people have talked to different people involved, and the cop that was hauling Oswald reportedly went on the record later on for saying, and Larry King has even talked about this, that Oswald just kept saying one thing over and over and over the whole way into Dallas PD's Central Station. And that is, I'm a patsy. I'm a patsy. A patsy is someone set up to be the fall guy. A patsy is someone set up to just take the fall and, be the one the blame goes upon. Now, of course, if you really get into the conspiracy theory weeds, there's all the stuff out there that Oswald was actually a CIA operative working in the intelligence community, trying to infiltrate the communists over in Russia, and that he had CIA handlers and whatnot. There's a lot of conspiracy that Oswald was involved in something like that. Okay? And so when he says he's a patsy, what does he mean by that exactly? Then, of course, we all know Oswald never saw one day in court because while coming out of the basement of Dallas PD, he was then shot by Jack Ruby. Okay? Now, for years and years and years and years and years, they told us there was no connection between Oswald and Ruby. Of course, with the little bit of information Trump did allow to be released last year, we then learned, there was a connection between Oswald and Ruby. They'd been lying to us, as if most people didn't already suspect it. Okay? So there's a big issue with the whole Oswald thing. And they've already told plenty of lies, and it looks like there was a big cover-up. Now, the fact that they claim all the shots came from behind in the Texas Book Depository building, that nothing came from the side or from the grassy knoll. Okay? Now, I want you to examine, if you can find the footage, and I know it was, I got what I could at the beginning. Watch the body movement of President Kennedy. Okay? So they're claiming that he was shot from behind. First shot comes in, hits him in the throat, he leans back, and he grabs the throat. Okay? Then, the fatal headshot that got half his head over here. Okay? Which direction does he go? The shot came from behind, right? Does he go this way? Because the bullet should be coming this way, right? No. He goes this way, which means shooter was in the grassy knoll facing, boom, goes back, passes by, boom, over. That's pretty simple physics there. And of course, remember, people nearby claim that that's where they heard the shots come from. Okay? So that's pretty fishy in of itself as well. Now, what gets even worse? That presidential limo was a crime scene. Should have been investigated because not only did Kennedy get shot, the governor got shot. One of the bullets caught him as well. Should have been investigated. It was a crime scene that should have been looked at. Okay? Now, of course, that didn't happen because literally the next day Lyndon Johnson had ordered that it be sent back up to Detroit to be refurbished. That's tampering with evidence. So no real investigation got to be done on the limo either. Okay? Then, of course, you've also got reports floating around out there that Kennedy's body was tampered with. That they saw I believe a gold or bronze colored casket get loaded into the plane, that he was draped in a sheet, I think it was, or something. And when he arrived in D.C., okay, the casket had changed and he was now in a bag. There's video out there about that. And then they claimed that the brain had been completely removed. There's people out there talking about that, saying, hey, something's up here. Something's not right. So, geez, how many more fishy things do we need to bring up here before we start to really question what happened on that day? And have we even been told a fragment of what the truth really is that happened to this guy? Again, you do your homework and you be the judge on what you think. But I don't think that there is any coincidence about what happened to JFK or his brother. And for that matter, possibly even his son as well. Okay? JFK was someone who wanted to stand up for the people. He was ahead of his time, and he wasn't going to bow down to the corporate system even back in the 60s. And I do believe that as a result of that, nefarious actors behind the scenes who did not want someone to be that much of a radical and not play their political games, they didn't want someone like that to be in power. Someone who didn't want to play ball by their rules was a threat to their power and had to be removed. And so, in my opinion, on that day, people behind the scenes committed a coup d'etat that day and assassinated the leader of this country to get him out of the way, because they felt that his policy and his leadership was too much of a threat to their corrupt power and influence over this country, to carry on their wars, to carry on their corruption. They didn't like what his vision was, they didn't like what his plan was, and they knew that it would get over with the American public. And they said, this guy has to go. Now, again, all of you be your judge on what happened on that dreadful day 56 years ago. That's my personal belief. That's just my personal belief on this matter. And I think it was a shame that we never got to see a second term from Kennedy, because I do believe that if we had got to see that second term, this country and the world perhaps could be a much different place today. I really do. And unfortunately, we never got to see that happen. But for all the people out there, just remember, a lot of the things that you're hearing from some of the candidates who are trying to stick by their morals and do the right thing now, that you're hearing, oh, it's radical. Medicare for all, single payer, was pitched over 50 years ago by JFK. Okay? So, don't buy into it, man. Don't buy into it, man. JFK was one of the people after Roosevelt that tried to stick to FDR's vision of a Democrat party that represented the blue-collar working people. Okay? And right after Reagan and right at Clinton, the Democratic Party took a hard right turn. A hard right turn. Became much more corporatist and much more like Republicans from back in the day. Okay? So with that being said, again, don't buy into it. JFK supported systems like that, and JFK was far ahead of his time for back in that era, of politics in the United States. And I do think that there's a lot that can be learned from the few years we did get of the Kennedy administration. I think there's a lot of wisdom there, a lot of things that can be learned, and I do hope that one day we can actually find out the truth about what happened to Kennedy and learn from it, and hopefully people can take that and apply it to finally straighten this country out and to make sure that nothing like that ever happens to again to a leader who wants to do right by the American people and do right by this country.